Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my top 10 list of upcoming comic book movies. This was a fan request, and while we normally get a lot of these, this one was for Olaf, who helped our channel out by letting us know we were nominated for the top 10 comic book channels on Watch Mojo. So I did this one as quickly as possible for him. You can expect the same deal if you ever get Comic Island's name mentioned in some other big name sites or social media. Now normally I wouldn't go for a list like this because it's going to get dated really fast. The realm of comic book movies has never been bigger, with 4 major studios pumping these things out and no end of them in sight. It's a golden age for fans like me, but also one with an ever-changing landscape of movie ideas, casting decisions, and announcements. Within a year, if not much sooner, this list will bound to start getting out of date. Even as I started writing my choices out, the entire schedule of these films was changed thanks to a recent deal between Sony and Marvel, and I had to update a few of my choices to reflect that. So keep in mind that this list is bound to change over time, and they're just my opinions as of February 2015. I will put a list of honorable mentions of the films that I am excited about, but also skeptical about the studio being able to put out something of the same outstanding quality that I'm starting to expect out of these things. Remember, these choices are subjective and just my opinions. Even though a lot of announced movies aren't on this list, it doesn't mean that I'm not excited for them. In a lot of ways, I'm just going to be guessing at what is good based on what we've seen so far. Every one of these movies could be great or a total disaster, and I won't know until I see them. That being said, I am pretty excited to see just about every movie that these studios make if they keep using the characters I love. Alright, let's do this thing. Number 10. Sony's next Spider-Man film. So let's talk about that recent deal I just mentioned. When I first made this list, out of the 4 film studios, it was only Sony that I left out. With The Amazing Spider-Man 2 underperforming at the box office and receiving lukewarm reception among fans and critics at best, it's starting to look like Sony was going to walk away from this franchise entirely. Honestly, I actually liked The Amazing Spider-Man 2 out of anything Sony's done with this character, but that isn't so much a compliment on this film as it is a scathing indictment of these 4 movies. The original trilogy does a good job, I guess, but it also feels so fake and watered down. While the rebooted movie is incredibly boring to me, mostly because I have heard and seen and read and played through this f***ing story too many times now to give a rat's ass about a goddamn origin story. Sorry, I have some rather aggravated feelings about how Spider-Man has been treated in film. Point is, I was pretty ready to write off any notion of Peter Parker being properly represented in film until the inevitable day of his return to the hands of Marvel. That isn't so much an assumption that Marvel is the only one who can make good comic book movies, but rather a lesson I've taken away that Sony simply can't. So I wasn't really surprised that Sony did end up making a deal with Marvel to work together on future films. Characters from the MCU and Spider-Man franchises will presumably be appearing in each of the studio's future projects. And there's really no reason that this should surprise anyone following these things. The companies have been trying to work this deal out for years, and while I have heard some people say that this might be a bad thing, and will push other ideas of Marvel to the side, I actually don't think this is the case, and we're only going to get more movies out of this deal. The increased popularity and hype these movies will generate will without a doubt fuel a bright future for both of these studios, which means all sorts of cool ideas are suddenly on the table. However, that is dependent on Sony not utterly messing things up. Like I said, I just don't feel that to date the Spider-Man films have lived up to one of my favorite superheroes. I've seen the true energy and spirit of Spider-Man through the comics, and it can be achieved through film. Sony needs to bring out the best talent they can find, and if Marvel can help with that, then things are looking good for the next big Spider-Man movie. The details keep trickling in as I write the script, but suffice to say whatever Sony's next big Spider-Man movie is, I'm pretty eager to see it. Considering how well I feel Marvel has done with capturing the spirit of comic books in their own movies, I am optimistic about the next Spider-Man film. Whether or not this movie is any good will only be a matter I really know after I see the movie itself. There's a lot riding on this one, as it will determine Spider-Man's future in the movies, but I think there's a lot of potential here. Not only does Spider-Man have some exciting options for appearing alongside the likes of the Avengers, but when you start considering what things are going to be like if, say, Captain America shows up in an Agent Venom movie, or maybe Flash Thompson joins the Guardians of the Galaxy or the Thunderbolts like he has in the comics, things start to seem really exciting for me indeed. And for once, just once, it would be nice to have a Spider-Man movie that I didn't have to cringe at halfway through. Please? Please?
Please don't say that. I know I've been selfish, but I can do better. I can change.
Not that simple.
We love each other. I love you.
I hate you. Number 9. X-Men Apocalypse. Another movie on this list that I feel has a lot riding on it. I think this film will really determine the entire future of the X-Men franchise, and whether or not I will be looking forward to the rest of their announcements. Days of Future Past was a solid opening to Fox's latest plans regarding the X-Men, with some absolutely amazing aspects to it. But I also found the movie lacking in certain areas, and in my opinion was a weaker film than its predecessor, First Class. Without intending to be too coy, it feels like the X-Men are literally stuck in the past, using the same look and much of the same cast as they were using a preposterous 15 years ago. That's right, the first X-Men movie starring Hugh Jackman and all of that crowd came back all the way in the year 2000. I know we're all a little sick of reboots, but the jaded choices of these movies are really starting to show, and this one's starting to feel overdue. Too much has changed since that first X-Men movie. Black leather costumes are not in anymore, and most superheroes these days look pretty damn close to their comic book counterparts. The attempt to look cool just looks pathetically dated to me relative to the more timeless outfits we see come out of some of the other comic book movie franchises these days. Nor can you really get away with the same quality and style of those earlier X-Men films. Since that time, we've gotten stuff like The Dark Knight and The Avengers, which is way better than anything the X-Men movies have ever been able to achieve, even at their very best, which is probably either here or here. Marvel and Warner Brothers has stepped up their game, and with it, everybody's expectations. And after seeing Days of Futures Past, I'm worried Fox is trapped in a long-gone era themselves. That's the last time pun, I swear. So a lot does hinge on this next movie. It's amazing, really. 10 years ago, I would have been so excited about an X-Men movie with Apocalypse in it. That's one of the best villains ever, with so many cool ideas that could be used for him. But I also never would have imagined that Thanos or Darkseid would be upcoming figures in these other big, awesome movies. Now I only look at X-Men Apocalypse and all the other related X-Men movies with a lot of skepticism. It's obvious they're trying to catch up with Marvel, but have no real plan or investment in the idea. I would love to see a good X-Force or Deadpool movie, but I need to see that Fox isn't going to tank the X-Men series like they've already done once. And it's hard to trust a company with too many of the same people that made utter nonsense like X-Men The Last Stand and Wolverine Origins involved. I know how bad these movies can get, and honestly, these days I'd rather have no X-Force movie over a lousy and half-assed one. We have plenty of cool comic book movies coming out, so why bother waiting for shitty ones? If X-Men Apocalypse is good and brings some new energy to this franchise, then I will definitely be looking forward to more of the X-Men movies. But for now, this is the only Fox film on this list because I can't help but feel doubtful. And make no mistake, Fox has more than earned this. I have every right to doubt a company that has already made 9 comic book movies and barely half of them are any good. That's right, out of 9 movies, 4 are unwatchable, and the other 5 are good, but when you get right down to it, not that great compared to what's out there now. That's a horrible track record. Apocalypse is an excellent and promising villain, but I refuse to acknowledge that I'm not being justifiably cautious when it comes to X-Men movies. Too many of the same directors, actors, and executives are behind this project for me not to be super worried about the quality of this movie. All I can hope is that Fox learns from the mistakes they've made, and bring us something really awesome with it. But they're going to have to step up their quality and keep these things consistently good.
When Captain America throws his mighty shield, all those who chose to oppose his shield must yield. If he's led to a fight and a duel is due, then the red and the white and the blue.
Number 8. Captain America Civil War. I really liked Captain America 2. While I enjoyed the first movie, The Winter Soldier really shines as a polished sequel, transitioning Captain America from a period piece superhero story to a modern-day action thriller. Based on nothing but this movie alone, I'd be pretty excited for Captain America 3 in any circumstance. But what really has me pumped for this one is the details coming out for this movie. Not only will it be taking cues from one of my favorites, Marvel's Civil War, but now this movie is supposedly going to include the likes of Iron Man, Black Panther, and potentially even Spider-Man. This movie is going to rock, and might feel as big as an Avengers movie. Phase 3 of the cinematic universe is starting to look really epic, but I actually think they will manage to keep this story grounded with Captain America and retain the conspiratorial espionage we got from Winter Soldier. And we can't expect similar major shifts in the cinematic universe as we got with Winter Soldier, as there is no way that Civil War won't be shaking things up in a big way. Even if you're not a fan of the Civil War comic, and I get why, I would be still pretty excited about this thing. There's no way they will tell the same story as the Civil War in the comics, and even though I'm a fan of that story, I wouldn't want to see an exact recreation of that anyways. I want something original and different to be surprising and impressive. And you know what? I'm pretty sure that this movie will deliver. Number 7. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Man, that's a dumb title. I actually checked that a few times. It's not Batman vs Superman, it's Batman v Superman. Ugh, weird. Anyways, I think it's time to introduce an important term for understanding my list, which is precedent. To me, a studio that's proven itself like Marvel is going to make movies I'm a lot more excited for than a studio that has historically been a lot more inconsistent with their films. And nobody is quite as inconsistent as Warner Brothers, having produced some of the greatest comic book movies, but having also dragged Batman and too many other characters' names through the mud with some of the worst titles in the entire history of film. Movies like Catwoman or Batman and Robin are not only considered one of the worst comic book movies out there, but are often also considered as some of the worst stuff ever shown in theaters. So yes, like Fox and Sony, I am skeptical about what DC can bring in the film industry. And they have earned this doubt. I would like to have a good Green Lantern movie, and I love the idea of a great Wonder Woman film. But I'm really not convinced that Warner Brothers can accomplish this sort of thing yet. So everything is kind of riding on the quality, tone, and setup that spins out of this next movie. I refuse to get excited for any of DC's other announced films until I can see they actually can put together something of decent quality. And that might seem mean, but with their last 3 major projects all being rather disappointing in my eyes, I do feel justified about this. In particular, Man of Steel has me really worried about the future of DC films. Drenched in corporate and military product placement, dated post 9/11 imagery, and plot points that make no sense that they broke any sense of engagement I ever had. Seriously, Zod, just colonize Mars, you're being an asshole for no reason! Superman's latest film was terribly underwhelming to me and a bad sign for the future of these movies. Unusual casting choices don't really bother me, as I will reserve judgment until I've seen actors and actresses in action. But the insane amount of rumored cameos seeding future movies, a Wonder Woman that doesn't very much look like the God of War to me, and having Zack Snyder directing this film does have me worried that we're going to get another bloated mess like The Amazing Spider-Man 2. In spite of all this doubt, this is Batman and Superman we're talking about here. I want this film to be amazing. Heck, if this launches a string of successful and well-made DC films, I would consider it a wish come true. I am excited by what I've seen of Batman. He looks very much like he does in the comics, and the Batmobile just looks perfect to me. And Zack Snyder has proven himself capable of good adaptation and visuals. I usually always like his movies, even if some of them feel pretty dumb to me. So there is some hope, but like with X-Men and Spider-Man, I need to see some better quality stuff before I start cheering the half-dozen DC films with a little more information than a title and who's in it. Whether or not I look forward to every single one of DC's planned movies is entirely dependent on this one, because to me, precedent is everything. There was a time that I was super skeptical about the Avengers being any good at all. But Marvel has proven themselves capable of producing consistently good content. Not all of their movies have been great, but they've all at the very least been good, and that makes me a lot more excited for their movies over Fox, DC, and Sony, who have been way more inconsistent with their quality. Were it not for the remarkable actions of Marvel, who has set excellent precedent, this probably would still be number 1 for me. These are 2 of the biggest heroes out there coming together for the first time in a major film. But like I said with X-Men, I would have been pumped on this one even several years ago. But one new studio came along and changed everything. Number 6. Captain Marvel. This is amazing. Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, and the X-Men have all been topped by a character most people have never even heard of in our very first movie. And I know for a fact I'm not the only person excited about this one. With good reason, too. First, we aren't getting an origin story, and I am just so happy about that. Marvel's decision to walk away from origin stories has to be one of the best things they did last year. See, at some point movies got the lousy idea in their heads that if they ever want to start telling a story about a superhero, they need to start at the beginning with their origins. But that's not generally how things work in the comics. Usually we see a hero in action and doing things before we find out about their origins through flashbacks, special issues, or implicit references far later in the series and long after their introduction. Sometimes a character's first story isn't their best one. More often than not, it's one of the worst. Too much time gets wasted on training montages, science exposition, and implausible costume design. And not enough energy is spent on telling a fun story. That's why I hated the Amazing Spider-Man movie. It felt like a montage of every superhero movie I've ever seen mashed together, and it just became so boring. With the case of Captain Marvel, I would much rather focus on a good story with her rather than being bogged down with her origins. This reason alone has me very excited for the new solo movies coming out of the Phase 3 of Marvel's cinematic universe. But having Captain Marvel as a major character in her own movie is also cause for high hopes, as this is a cool character who will bring a long overdue solo film starring a woman. I'm excited to see this one, especially if the rumors of Emily Blunt being cast in this role are true. After seeing Edge of Tomorrow, I can state for certain that she'd be perfect for this role, and I can't wait to see this movie when it comes out. Number 5. Black Panther. Following up on my last choice is another origin-free solo movie by Marvel. Like Captain Marvel, I'm looking forward to a good, solid story with Black Panther, of which there are many out there that have been told. I can think of like 10, but if you want to see him in action, I recommend you track down the Black Panther motion comic they made a while back. It's really good and was very nicely produced. So it's a promising film even without much information on it, especially with the rumors that we might see this character in Age of Ultron or Civil War. With a soft introduction, the seeds of a good Black Panther story can be planted, and I expect this one will fit in nicely with the larger canon of the cinematic universe. You won't want to miss this one. There's not much to add to this. There's a lot of potential to this kind of story they can tell with this character. We'll have to wait and see to know for sure, but I'm pretty confident this one will be worth your time. Number 4. Doctor Strange. The last of my solo films on my list. It's Doctor Strange that I'm most excited for out of the non-team-based movies. Again, I find this crazy that I'm more eager for Doctor Strange than Apocalypse or Batman and Superman teaming up. But like I said before, precedent is everything. Unlike the other studios, Marvel has largely earned my trust. Plus, like with Black Panther and Captain Marvel, I really like the idea of getting a good Doctor Strange story over a Doctor Strange origin story. That's a big difference, and one that I'm really looking forward to. Not only that, this will be our first major introduction to magic and the role it plays in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which should be quite interesting, but also promises to open up some very, very cool stories and characters that can be used in future films. This is actually my most anticipated solo film for one reason above all others. Benedict Cumberbatch. This was a perfect casting decision, as this man will bring the exact tone Doctor Strange needs. Authoritarian and confident enough to deliver all that silly magic lines with a straight face, but be able to make fun of himself in that little way that is common to all the Marvel movies. I am a huge fan of the BBC Sherlock series that Cumberbatch stars in, and if you want to get an idea of what this guy will be like and why I'm so excited for it, start there. You'll thank me later. But seriously, that show is awesome. Number 3. Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Yeah, if you haven't figured it out yet, Marvel is sweeping the rest of this list. Like I said, one company has repeatedly put out fun, if not always perfect movies that I've enjoyed every time, while the others really haven't, even in recent history. Heck, especially in recent history. Marvel has earned this, and Guardians of the Galaxy 2 easily takes my number 3 choice. I love the first movie. Really, for all its plot points and issues some people had with it, I just had a blast. It was so well cast, so funny, and so well put together that I can't help but adore the first film with a team that I've been a fan of for a really long time. The sequel to Guardians is all the promise of the first, but I have a feeling it'll be even better. Not having to show the team come together and introduce the audience to all the characters, we can instead jump straight into the action, and I expect Guardians of the Galaxy 2 will be one hell of a ride. With the perfect setup to an all-new but equally awesome soundtrack, the return of Groot, and likely more details on Peter's father, this is going to be one of the movies that I'll be looking forward to eagerly. I've been a fan of director James Gunn ever since he's made the vastly undervalued movie Super, starring Rainn Wilson, which to date is my very favorite superhero movie. He's a funny guy who can also deliver sincere emotional moments, and I can't wait to see him at the helm of a big sequel like this one. But more than anything else in the world, I really hope Cosmo comes back with a proper speaking role. I just love that guy. Number 2. The Infinity War, Parts 1 and 2. Is it fair to count these two together? I mean, it's my list and I can do what I want, so yes, it is fair, but it still feels very weird to me. It's bad enough considering what my overly predictable number 1 choice is, but with movies becoming increasingly serialized and watched over Netflix, I think it's fair to count this one together. For one thing, this is a rare example of a moment where I feel 2 parts to a movie are justified. This would have been a story seeded in the very first Thor movie, so having these 2 films cover the ending does feel necessary to have something big and epic live up to the name of Thanos and all that these movies have been building up to. I mean, if Harry Potter gets a 2-movie finale, you better believe that the Avengers have earned it as well. The only thing that bothers me about this guy is that I have a feeling that part 1 is going to be super unsatisfying on its own. Like Harry Potter or the Hunger Games, doing these things in 2 parts does mean that the first one tends to be almost completely built up. On the other hand, part 2 promises to be so big and epic that it's hard to argue it won't all be worth it. At the center of this big film will be Joss Whedon, whose talents and work on the first Avengers movie has earned enough credibility in my eyes that I'm pretty excited for this one as long as Whedon remains firmly in the director's chair. The only reason that it's not number 1 on this list should be fairly obvious by now, but just in case it isn't,
I'm gonna show you something beautiful.
Number 1. Avengers: Age of Ultron. Yeah, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone by now. I remember when the first Avengers movie came out and I was watching it in theaters. Do you remember the first time watching this moment? When all the Avengers are gathered together in New York? I vividly remember that scene, and ever since that moment, I have been pretty excited to see Age of Ultron. Avengers is without a doubt one of my very favorite comic book movies to date. I like movies like The Dark Knight, Guardians of the Galaxy, and the aforementioned Super, but I feel like it's the Avengers that to this day has best captured the feelings of awe and potential that I get out of reading a good comic book. The Avengers felt more like a comic story come to life than any other adaptation I have ever seen, and I love this movie for that reason. The trailer looks very promising, and like Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I feel that free from having to worry about showing this team come together and introducing everybody, we can instead drive straight into a good, solid story. This one is going to be amazing, folks, and I can't wait to see it myself.
Are you even pulling?
Are you on my team?
Just represent, pull.
All right, let's go.
Come on, Cap.
Nothing.
Oh, no, that's not a question I need answered.
The handle's in print.
And that's it. Those are the movies I'm most looking forward to. I do apologize for it being so dominated by Marvel movies, but as I tried to rather thoroughly explain throughout the list, in my eyes, they have really earned this. What movies are you most looking forward to? Let me know in the comments section. Also, if there is a top 10 list you'd like to see, feel free to request it as well. These things take time, but I promise I will get them out as best I can. We also have a website, Facebook, and Twitter page where you can stay on top of all of our latest videos. And finally, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.